People for a while now have been asking me, hey, Izzy, love your content, but I'd really like it if you made a YouTube channel. So I finally obliged and did it, and here I am. So first of all, welcome. My name's Izzy. This is my YouTube channel, and mostly what I do is talk about books, but sometimes I'll talk about video games or movies or music or whatever that I'm interested in. So hopefully y'all are into it and you want to follow and like my videos or whatever. And I appreciate everyone suggesting me do this. Today's video is about my top 5 favorite fantasy/science fiction books of all time. Now, first of all, this could change at literally any point. This may need to be re-uploaded in like a month or a year. And I also, number 2, have not read as much as many other people on BookTube or BookTok. I've read probably like 40 to 50 fantasy books in my entire life. And that's probably like on the high end of what I'm trying, like on the high end. I don't know for certain how many I've read. I'd have to like go and look and count. But compared to a lot of people, I haven't read like a ton. I mean, I just read like The Wheel of Time for the first time in my life this year. And before last year, I didn't know what Stormlight was. So my fantasy experience is not going to be the same as everyone else. But hopefully my picks make sense for what I've read so far. So starting at number 5, I have a two-way tie between The Gathering Storm by Brandon Sanderson and Robert Jordan. This is the 12th Wheel of Time book, and God Emperor of Dune, which is the 4th Dune book written by Frank Herbert. Now, the reason that these are tied despite being so different is because I like them about equally. First off, the reason I'm really into The Gathering Storm is I just think that Brandon Sanderson manages to capture everything that Wheel of Time does well as a fantasy series into a singular book while giving us some of the most beautiful, heartwarming, and heartbreaking chapters we've had up to that point in the entire series. I mean, the Rand character development here is excellent. The action here is excellent. What he does with Madden Perrin is excellent. What he does with Egwene is excellent. The entire White Tower plotline is absolutely wonderfully done. I mean, everyone in this book I thought was spectacular, and I think it has the best Rand chapter in the entire series with Veins of Gold. I mean, it literally just made me cry. It's a moment I think about often. It's something I kind of, it's I don't want to say it's like sad to say, but like that chapter really reminded me like there's a reason to like keep going every single day. It's not my only reason to keep going, but it's like that reminder of, hey, I can do better today, and I can keep fighting for the things I believe in today. So it's just a very special book to me. It's a genuine 10 out of 10. Everything on this list is. But yeah, that's why it's at number 5. Now, the other spot is for God Emperor of Dune at number 5. And this book is so different than The Gathering Storm, right? But the reason that this works for me on a fundamental level is, first off, I think it just captures the essence of Dune, right? You're gonna hear me say that a lot about a lot of these books. It captures the essence of what I'm looking for in a book, right? It's got the science fiction elements, right? It's got the space opera stuff. It's got the weirdness. But what really draws me into loving Dune as a series so much is the philosophical thinking of the future, right? I would not call myself a cynical person, but I tend to agree with people who have cynical outlooks on the future of humanity, like the idea that we'll eventually just go back to a medieval, like, feudal system in the future if we make it that far. Like, I don't agree with that necessarily, but I can see why you would think that. And I also just really like the philosophical and political thinking of like, what is it to be a god? What is it to be human? is it right to subject humanity to thousands of years of stagnation if ultimately it's going to save the human race? I don't know. Like, this book just works. It's got kind of it's got a mad plot, but the characters are incredible, especially with Leto II. I just think he's like an incredible character to get in the head of. And it feels like after you've read it, you're like, I have way more questions than answers. And I like that about a book. I like feeling like I can just keep rereading it and gaining more and more about what Frank's trying to say in it. So that's why it's at number 5, tied with The Gathering Storm. Now, number 4, very different book, but that would be Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson. Again, like I said earlier, before last year, I had never heard of Stormlight Archive. But after getting back into fantasy reading, people were like, you have to read Stormlight. You have to read Stormlight. Way of Kings, Word of Radiance, some of the best books you'll ever read. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. Sat down, read Way of Kings, really enjoyed it, immediately went out and bought Words of Radiance. And dude, this book has everything that you're looking for in fantasy, right? Or at least like more traditional fantasy. It's got the epic scope. It's got the world building. It's got the good versus evil characters, kind of. It's got the grand scale epic battles. It's got the action. It's just got the stuff. One of the things I really like about Stormlight Archive is that Brandon Sanderson is willing to do like it with his book. And by that, I mean he's just willing to go there when it comes to creativity in his fantasy books. He's willing to create systems, whether it be magic or world building, that just you don't traditionally see, right? Because most of modern epic fantasy, as we understand it, is like medieval Europe adjacent. No, this dude decided that having giant storms fly over a continent that is surrounded by mostly crustacean creatures while humans try and survive would be a really cool idea, and he totally nails it. Not only that, but his magic system's really cool, his characters are really cool. You don't necessarily know exactly what's going on, like you don't see the entire picture, and it leaves you with enough mysteries to want to come back and reread it when you finish the series. And I just think it's awesome. Also, it has some of the most highs I've ever read in any fantasy book. I'm talking about emotions I've never felt before I read this book. I've never cheered. I've never cried. I've never clapped. I've never laughed like this book made me laugh. So for those reasons, it's at the number 4 spot. Now, number 3 is probably to no surprise to anyone who knows me personally, A Storm of Swords by George R.R. Martin. I mean, what can I say about A Storm of Swords that, you know, like everyone's said what this book is, right? It's a masterpiece through and through. I can't really add anything to the dialogue that other people haven't said. All I can say is this. I read a Game of Thrones in college after I finished the Game of Thrones TV show. And I went in and I expected to not feel the way I felt while watching the show. Because I saw it coming, right? And yet, when you get to the Red Wedding, it made me cry all over again. Now, I've read the series multiple times since then, and every single time I get to A Storm of Swords, like I have to like mentally prepare myself because it's the book that always makes me cry. Like no matter how many times I read it, I always get like slightly emotional about it. So I think that's why it's at number 3, because not only is it a monumentous book that does, I think, some of the best character work in any fantasy work, period, but it's just meant a lot to me emotionally. I see a lot of my characters get sent off, favorite characters get sent off in this book, while introducing many others. We get so many great character moments. We get one really epic battle. We get great character moments. We get great dialogue, some of the best dialogue in the entire series, and we have the Red Wedding. I mean, what else can I say? This book is just absolutely epic in every single sense. Like it's just one of the best fantasy books ever. It's hard to describe how good it is if you haven't read it, but if you have, you know what I mean. Like, if you love A Song of Ice and Fire, this is probably one of your favorites, if I had to guess. Now, number 2 was, for over like 2 years, my favorite book of all time. I never thought that this would get replaced. It finally has. But that book is Dune by Frank Herbert, the first book in the Dune saga. How do I even describe this book and what it's meant to be? You know, I've loved this book for a long time. After watching Dune Part 1 in the theaters, I was like, oh, I should read this, because I really liked Dune Part 1. I really liked that movie. It was one of my favorite movies of that year. It's become one of my favorite movies of all time. I think it's in the top 10 or top 15 of mine. So I sat down and I read it, and I couldn't stop reading it. Like, it's a fairly long book. I think it's like 600 pages, and I think I read it in like 2 days. Like, I seriously could not put it down. I was blown away by how well written it was, how much I connected to it. I mean, it was really just everything I guess I was looking for in a science fiction book at the time. First of all, I love philosophy. I love politics. I love history. I like books that make me think about those things. I like books that make me think about their themes and what the author is trying to achieve, and why an author is saying what they are. Like, what is the subtext here? Who can I relate to? Let me get in their shoes. And that's something Frank Herbert does, and just does it incredibly well. Now, for a lot of people, the way it's written is kind of a learning curve, but for me, I really liked it. It kind of reminded me of like watching an actual literal opera take place. And the head hopping, for a lot of people, that bothers them, but for me, I just thought it made all the characters feel more realized. I just really enjoy it. I think Paul is one of the best realized protagonists of all time. He's incredibly sympathetic. I have a ton of videos on TikTok from like when Dune Part 2 came out, explaining how much I love this series and how much it blew my mind. But yeah, it's just like one of the best books ever written, in my opinion. I still think it's the best science fiction book of all time, and I don't know if anything will ever replace it for me, because it's got everything. It's got the action, it's got the dialogue, it's got the deep philosophical thoughts, and it's got the cool concept. It just has everything that you're looking for in science fiction, and it's inspired basically all of modern science fiction, alongside like stuff like The Foundation, Frankenstein, World of Wars, etc. But Dune really is the capstone. It's the reason stuff like Star Wars exists. So for that reason alone, Dune's number 2. Now, you're asking, what could have possibly replaced Dune? I mean, you just like sucked it dry. So what could possibly have replaced Dune, something that was like your favorite novel for years of your life? And that is A Memory of Light by Brandon Sanderson and Robert Jordan. It is the final book in the Wheel of Time series, and what an ending it is. I mean, people who have followed me on TikTok know this about me, but I adore The Wheel of Time. It is my favorite fantasy series ever. It replaced A Song of Ice and Fire, the long-reigning champion, after book 5. By book 14, dude, I was more invested in this world and these characters than basically anything else I've ever read in my entire life. The only series I can compare The Wheel of Time to, when it comes to the significance of how much I love it, is like One Piece. And as you guys can tell, I love One Piece. So to even be on the same level where I'm like, oh yeah, these characters mean everything to me, and I was attached to everyone, I mean that stuff, man. So to see it all come to a head and be concluded in the satisfactory and emotional way that was, at least for me, meant a lot. I mean, we have great character moments, we have great action, we have great continuous world building. We get a very good, solid conclusion to the series that still leaves a lot of questions on the table, still leaves you with wanting more, but that's a good thing. It's not the ending, because there are no permanent endings to the Wheel of Time, but it is a ending, and it's a very, very good one. I mean, it just leaves you feeling both empty because the journey is finally over, but also satisfied. I mean, it really is like the most epic thing I've read in my life. There's no other way to describe it. It just has literally everything. It made me laugh. It made me cry. It made me feel everything that a person can feel. And by the end, I mean, I was a mess. Like, when I finished A Memory of Light, I'll just be totally honest, I was a total mess. And no book in my entire life has ever made me feel the way that this book has made me feel. I mean, you know, if you've read the entire Wheel of Time, you probably know what I mean. But like, I got to the end, I read, you know, the final sentence or the final word, and I sat there and I just I cried. And that's not something that a lot of books make me do, but I mean, I grieved the fact that I finally finished it. You know, I had been anticipating finishing it. I had thought that by the time I got to the end, I wouldn't want to read anymore. And then I got to the end and I was like, God, I can't wait to read this again. Like, I can't wait to read this series again. I can't wait to introduce my kids to this series at some point in the future. You know, I can't wait to show more people this series. And I think any book where you get to the end of a series and gives you that emotion needs to be number one. I mean, it's my favorite book of all time, easily. It just means a lot. So yeah, those would be my top 5 favorite fantasy books at the moment. But you know, in a year, this could change. You know, A Memory of Light could be replaced. Maybe Dune goes back up to number 1. We never know. You know, maybe George R.R. Martin will put out a Winds of Winter, and that'll be number 1. But seriously, thank you guys for watching. That's my top 5 for now. If you enjoyed the video, like it, subscribe, do whatever you do on YouTube, and have a great afternoon or morning or whatever.